A mix of national and local politics as we talk immigration, affordability, and can Greenland become the sixth borough? Well, I'm just kidding about that. The Point starts right now. Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez is not running for re-election, but she still has some big issues to contend with in the next 11 months. And one of those issues is what to do about the budget. As of Friday, the president and the Senate, Democrats and Republicans, had reached a deal to avoid a shutdown of government, but it included only 2 weeks of funding for Homeland Security so that there could be worked out a deal to rein in the actions of immigration agents. How do you feel about that deal, and do you think the House will be willing to go along?
Well, Marcia, as you know, the people in this country are outraged by the ICE agents' actions and the fact that 2 American citizens were basically assassinated in Minneapolis. And the American people do not condone this type of behavior. So the Democrats, we have to use every tool at our disposal to make sure that we rein in ICE and the Border Patrol agents. They are not supposed to be inland. They're supposed to be at the border, making sure that Americans are protected. And that is not what is happening. So there has to be accountability. We need to reform ICE. There has to be accountability and transparency. And we need to stand up. Democrats, this is our chance to reform ICE and to make sure that human rights and civil rights are not violated in this country.
So what kind of changes would you like to see?
Well, for once, a police officer cannot knock at my door in my house without a badge that states his name or wearing a mask. That is basic, because if they say that they are committed to safety and security in our communities, you don't achieve that by instilling fear, not only among undocumented people, but also among American citizens.
So the thing is this, given the fact that the president has defended ICE, what hope do you have that the president and the Republicans in the Senate and the House will agree to substantial changes in how ICE operates?
Well, they don't have the votes to pass the budget. They need 7 Democratic senators to vote for this budget. And I believe that I haven't seen this kind of unity among Democrats, both in the House and in the Senate now. So this is a moment that we need to meet in the sense that people in this country are in pain by looking at the actions, inhumane treatment of people in this country. We cannot be the beacon of hope and treating people here, undermining the Constitution, denying due process. That is not who we are.
So many people who are running for office and many people who are already in office have called for the abolition of ICE. Do you think that that's going to be a compromise that will be agreed to, or is there a middle ground that you think will emerge from these negotiations?
Well, when we created ICE, right after the terrorist attack, it was not intended to become a paramilitary force of this president. That's the issue. So we need to reform it and bring it back to what it was, the mission that was espoused by the creation of Homeland Security. And that is not what we are seeing today. And we have to be strong, because we do not believe that this president, unless is clearly stated, will respect the wishes of the American people by reforming ICE without putting strong language and clear language into this bill.
I think that you have to ask the question about what you want ICE to do. I'm reminded of a press conference that Mayor Adams had, I want to say 4 months ago, 5 months ago, and it was with ICE agents, and they announced that they were cracking down on a group, Tren de Aragua, that had been like it's a gang that was bringing drugs into the country. And it was a combination of ICE agents, NYPD, and other federal agencies. Is that the kind of thing you'd like to see? Because, you know, there are instances when there are people who have come into the country who are committing crimes.
Marcia, we don't want criminals coming into this country. That is a very important issue that defines all of us, Republicans and Democrats. It's about safety and security. But not every undocumented who is here is a member of a gang.
That's true.
In fact, is less than 2-3% of the people that have been detained that have criminal records. The big majority of the people that are being detained and deported, violating due process, are people that are here working every single day to raise their family, to send their children to school. That is the kind of people that we want working in this country, and that is not what we're doing.
You know, earlier in the week, Congressman Mike Lawler put out a plan he suggested it be a bipartisan plan to reform the whole immigration system, and not only to have an investigation, an independent investigation of what went on in Minneapolis, but also to establish some kind of path to citizenship for people who have been here. Is that something that you think that Democrats could get behind, or is this an election year play because he's running for re-election?
Marcia, it takes two to tango. I've been here almost 34 years, introducing immigration legislation to reform a broken system. And just back when Donald Trump was campaigning in this last election, there was almost a bipartisan agreement in the Senate. And he called Mitch McConnell and told him not to support it. Why? Because it became a political point for them.
But see, now the politics have changed. Now the politics have changed, and if you look at polls, people are aghast about what happened in Minneapolis, and there's a call for change. So do you think now that the things have happened in Minneapolis that there's more of an interest in finding a solution that's bipartisan?
Well, I pray that that happens before I leave Congress. I've been working on this issue for many years, and it is, and we should do it because it's the right thing to do, not because it's politically convenience.
Should ICE be abolished?
Pardon?
Should ICE be abolished?
Well, we need to have an agency that deals with security at the border. And that has to be clearly defined so that a president, the current president or a future president, do not use it as a paramilitary force like Donald Trump is doing. So we need to make sure that the border is safe, that we use the technology that we have to prevent bad actors from coming in. But that is not what ICE is doing today.
So basically what you're saying is this: ICE has a role to play at the borders, but you wonder about the role that it's playing now in cities across the country.
It's correct, yes.
I mean, the reason I asked that question is because on Friday, Governor Hochul introduced legislation that would prevent law enforcement agencies in New York State from signing agreements where they work with ICE. I wonder how you feel about that.
Well, I'll applaud the governor for taking that step. We cannot continue to instill fear in our communities. If you want to solve the issue of security and safer communities, that is the wrong approach. So we need to reform, we need to abolish ICE and create an agency with clear mission and define steps that they will implement, but also with guardrails that will prevent them from abusing the people that they are supposed to work with.
Okay, Congressman, we're going to have to leave it right there for now. But our conversation continues right after the show on our streaming channel, CBS News New York. Brad Hoylman-Sigal is the new Manhattan Borough president, and it's been so busy and so active from day one. But I need to ask you this. So how did we do in removing the snow?
Well, I think we did good, particularly in the first 24 to 48 hours. 90% of Manhattan was cleared at least once in the first 12 hours. Now we still have some snow at the corners of sidewalks. We got to get rid of that snow because older folks, people with disabilities are having trouble with access. So we're hearing some reports there, but I know that sanitation is doing the best job. And I actually got a chance to go out and thank them yesterday. You know, a lot of people show up the day of the snowstorm. I was advised to show up a couple of days after and thank them for all the work, because they worked 12-hour shift, 24 hours a day, and I think they did an excellent job. So I commend the mayor and his team and all of the emergency responders during that time.
So I have to ask you this, though. You know, one of the things that happened during the snow was that there were 10 people, homeless people, many of them, who died, and many of them, some of them were in Manhattan. And I wonder how you feel about the outreach efforts that we're making to help people who are unhoused find shelter.
Well, this is one of the mayor's top priorities. It's what he ran on, housing homeless New Yorkers and having a response to this crisis of humanity that's on our streets. So my heart breaks, and you know, the hope count itself, where we all go out and count the number of people who are unhoused, was actually delayed because of the cold, and that's telling in and of itself. It's too cold to even count the unhoused people. Think of the people who are unhoused themselves. We have to do more. We have to build more housing, supportive housing. We have to get people off the streets. No other world city has the problem we have, and we have to fix it.
So do you think the answer is building more supportive housing, building more affordable housing, or are there people that just need to be hospitalized, that need psychiatric help and need a different kind of support?
I think it's both. Everything has to be on the table. Certainly housing has to be top of our priority, and government needs to do direct investment. We can't just rely on the private sector to build supportive housing, which is a real need in Manhattan at the moment.
So I have to ask you, because we all know that you were a state senator for a very long time in Albany and know Albany better than anybody I know. So the mayor of the city of New York says he wants Albany to tax the rich and tax corporations. I wonder if you think this is something that's doable in Albany this year, given the fact that everybody in Albany is running for re-election, including the governor of the state of New York. It's not, raising taxes in an election year seems to be a third rail. I wonder how you feel about it and whether the mayor is going to be able to convince enough people to get it passed.
Well, I think the mayor has a really strong point. The top 1% of earners in the city of New York pay the same effective tax rate as the bottom 40%. And remember that the top 1%, they earn $7 to $9 million a year. So that is a disparity that the mayor is pointing out. But certainly that is going to be a challenge, especially when the governor has drawn a line in the sand. She's saying no new taxes on personal income. But corporate taxes, she's open to. And I think that is an area where the mayor and the governor will have agreement.
See, I need to ask you about that, because if you take a look at the corporate tax rate, given the combination of city and state corporate taxes and the taxes that corporations pay for the MTA,
yes,
we pay the same as New Jersey. Corporations pay the same as New Jersey, which is like 17.5% or something like that. if you add the taxes, it could double the tax rate. And that could mean corporations, many of whom are in your borough,
Indeed.
they could leave. And I wonder if that's something that troubles you because it's part of the economic base of Manhattan.
Well, one has to be mindful of that, and it's always a balancing act. But you also have to remember that corporations themselves, they are made up of people. They know that they thrive because of city services, fire, police. They are being kept safe, as are their employees, parks, schools, mass transit. You have to pay for those goods. And that's why corporations want to headquarter here in Manhattan and across the city, is because of those great city services and assets.
If the corporate tax rates double?
Well, obviously, it's a balancing act. It always is. But in terms of the very wealthy, the statistics show that they have not fled New York City or the metro area in recent years, as some would have claimed.
The reason I ask these questions about it is because the governor said that she doesn't believe there's a need to raise taxes this year because the state is expecting an extra, believe it or not, $17 billion from Wall Street bonuses, and that the city would get that as well. So I wonder how you feel about that, but also the New York Stock Exchange has opened a branch in Texas. And so there's a worry on the part of some people in the business community that they would take some of their business and their corporations and their $17 billion worth of bonuses and move it to Texas, which is a much lower tax state. Is that a concern for the Manhattan Borough President?
It is. It should always be a concern for any elected official. We are competing on a world stage, on a national stage. We want to headquarter businesses here. We want to keep them here. Certainly balancing taxes with the services that are provided is one of the most artful forms of government. And that's what the governor and the mayor are going to be engaged in during this budget process, a conversation that hopefully leads to the greater equity for all New Yorkers and corporations, but also providing the funds necessary to keep the city running and providing for the most vulnerable.
I know you've only been Manhattan Borough President for a few weeks, but I wonder if you think, you know, the mayor has talked about finding efficiencies rather than closing the budget. Are there enough efficiencies that you can find in the budget that you won't have to do some wholesale cuts?
I hope so. You know, he's made certain that each department has an efficiency expert to look for potential savings. It sounds like a good first step. You want to look for savings first before you go to cuts or tax increases. So it's a logical first step in my mind.
So also he talked about the fact that you could find an efficiency by limiting the SRG unit at the police department, which handles protests and terrorism. Good idea, bad idea?
Well, you know, I want to see what the outlines of that are. Certainly, you know, with everything happening in this country, with ICE, you know, at our doorsteps, we have to be very careful in terms of, you know, cuts to our own police force, because we don't want ICE coming into New York City as they have in other municipalities. And of course, the tragic murders that we've seen in Minneapolis are front of mind, as they are for I would say, most New Yorkers.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it right there for now, but we will be right back. Thank you for joining me. Do you remember the last time you applied for a job? Did you break out in a cold sweat? Did it make your mouth get dry? Well, some New Yorkers would rather apply and interview online, and they're weighing in on your point. When was the last time you applied for a job?
Around 2000.
2 years ago? Probably like 6 months ago.
It's been a long time, like 3-4 years.
Last time I applied was 1969, and it was for, I became the education director for the New York State Office of Drug Abuse.
Yesterday.
Really? What was that like?
It was good.
What did you apply for?
I was a specialist.
Do you remember the first time you ever applied for a job? What was that job interview like?
I grew up in Hawaii, so it was in Honolulu, and I applied to work at Edible Arrangements. And I don't know, it was really easy. I just walked in and a friend had recommended me and they said, "You're hired."
I went into a bunch of the stores in town to give them my resume. Ended up working at Subway.
Scooping ice cream.
Scooping ice cream.
When I was 16.
I was 12 years old. It was for a local Dairy Queen.
Intern
You were an intern for what?
in the Lindsay administration for a housing nonprofit on the Upper West Side.
I think I worked at Forever 21 when it was downtown.
And what was that like?
It was like it was really easy. That was a walk in the park. You just went in with your resume and just applied.
What was that like, though, applying for that first job? Were you scared? Were you nervous?
I wasn't. I was a confident person, and I had always been reinforced by I had always succeeded.
It was scary. I didn't know where to start. I was young. I was probably 15, 14, for Dunkin' Donuts.
I was just nervous. I didn't know what to say.
Yeah, because you don't get that preparation, so you don't know.
So do you think applying online makes it easier or harder to get a job?
Online's better.
I think easier for this business, for actors. It's easier.
It's way harder online.
Interns love it. Young people love it.
I've never had to apply online. I'm too old for that.
It's harder. Like, there's nobody to talk to. It's like you're trying to figure out. You don't know if you got it or not.
Much harder. I think because a lot of companies, and I know a lot of companies are using AI to sort of sift through resumes.
I think in some ways it makes it harder because the volume of other applicants for your position, it's hard to stand out.
All these companies, like, you apply online and you put in like 8 million applications, and then most of them don't even bother to email you back, even if they reject you. So it gets pretty discouraging.
It's become a game of like putting buzzwords in your resume.
Does applying online make it easier or harder to get a job?
Harder.
Why?
Because you eliminate the human factor. It's just words.